Hi, welcome back to Securities Regulation. In this lecture, we'll be talking about global depository receipts. Now, what are depository receipts? Let's start with that. We know for a fact that listed companies can raise funds from outside of the country. We know for a fact that they can do so by directly listing their shares on stock exchanges across the world. In fact, many companies in India have done so already. Now, why would a company want to list outside of India? Well, one of the reasons is recognition. If a company is globally recognized and it is seen to be adhering to the highest standards of conduct and corporate governance, not just for its own home jurisdiction, but also jurisdictions outside, it is seen to be a good company because it meets such high standards of conduct. But another reason is that many other countries may have far deeper pockets. Many other markets might be far more sophisticated, might have greater market depth, and many more investors would be available to these companies, and therefore you can raise funds from there. Now, while a company may list its equity shares on a publicly on a stock exchange outside of India, most companies in India prefer to use the global depository receipt mechanism. Now, how does this work? It's a fairly simple process. First, the company issues shares to a local bank. Now, let's take, say, for example, HSBC. HSBC is a banking corporation which has branches all over the world. Now, our Indian company issues shares to HSBC in India. HSBC India then sends a message to, let's say, HSBC in Luxembourg saying that we have received shares as the custodian of these shares from this company in India. The bank in Luxembourg then says, all right, I will now release depository receipts, which are basically derivative instruments. They derive their value from the underlying shares that have been received in India. They will release these depository receipts to shareholders in Luxembourg. Now, why Luxembourg, you might ask? Well, data suggests that most Indian companies tend to list their GDRs in Luxembourg. One of the reasons for this is that the listing requirements in Luxembourg are fairly low compared to other countries across the world. Luxembourg also allows non-resident investors to invest in depository receipts that have been issued on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, which means that somebody sitting in, let's say, Switzerland or the Grand Cayman Islands for that matter, could actually buy depository receipts on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, and that money would eventually flow into the Indian company that has deposited shares in the Indian branch. Now, a lot of people think that this might be a way of round-tripping money or bringing back money that has not been accounted for from outside India into India. But there is yet to be any conclusive evidence or any conclusive proof on this. So effectively, a global depository receipt is nothing but a derivative instrument which is issued against the deposit of shares by a company in an Indian bank, and this depository receipt is released to non-resident investors in stock markets across the world. Typically, the listing requirements for a depository receipt are far lower than that of shares, which is why most companies choose to do a depository receipt listing as opposed to direct shares being listed. Lastly, if a company is issuing depository receipts in the United States, they are no longer known as global depository receipts or GDRs, they are known as American depository receipts or ADRs. And this is exactly what Satyam did. Satyam was a listed company in India, but it had also listed its shares on the New York Stock Exchange in the form of American depository receipts. Eventually, when the share prices of Satyam fell following the scandal, the share prices of American depository receipts also fell. In the United States, in the state of New York, many ADR holders moved the New York courts to ask for compensation because this steep drop in prices was due to a fraudulent practice that had been carried out by the Ramalinga brothers. As a result, eventually what happened was Tech Mahindra, who had eventually taken over Satyam, they had to pay compensation against the losses that have been caused to these ADR holders. Eventually, the ADR holders did get compensation. So just to round things up, a global depository receipt is nothing but a derivative instrument issued against the deposit of shares in an Indian bank.